Oh, hey, we're live.
Woohoo!
So
We survived.
We survived. Give it just a minute. Let some people catch up with us here online, and also let us get all synced up with our friends at the Vibe Radio Network.
Yes.
It'll just take a few seconds. So
your show will go live in 5
a
seconds.
few seconds
4,
literally.
3, 2, 1.
Say hello, Yuna.
Blog Talk Radio.
Hey.
Hi.
Good evening, everybody.
Hello, says Yuna.
This is Chris.
I'm Beth. And Yuna.
And Yuna. And yeah.
Yes, I have picked you away from your trouble spot.
We-
Because you are being troubled.
We somehow survived October.
Still living with a pulse.
We
now.
are still here, some way, somehow. We'll take it. And hey, as everybody tuning in, thank you very much for tuning in. We're glad to have you here tonight. So yeah, make sure we got everything. Obviously got the cat, check. Got Madeira, check. Good stuff. Fire, check.
Yep,
Can't
she's
really.
right behind you.
Yep, can't see it behind your arm. Got a fire.
Sorry.
There's a fire back there. Check. And stories about dead people. Check. Yeah, we got that.
Okay.
So, good evening and welcome to Haunts of Richmond's Fireside Chat.
Yes, so we decided to invoke FDR.
Yes, so much like FDR, we're here to try and bring a sense of calm and self-assurance to you in these troubled times. Why? Well, as if 2020 hasn't been bad enough so far, Election Day is now upon us.
Yeah.
Yeah. That might very well be the most single terrifying sentence that we utter all evening long.
Can we go back to 2 weeks ago, please?
Oh, whatever. But
Anyway, moving forward.
We are here to do the best we can to try and distract you for the next hour or so. So, pour yourself a drink. We already have. I can promise you that. Sit back, relax, and we hope that you will enjoy this reminder that politicians are not the only frightening creatures and wraiths that roam amongst our otherwise beautiful capital city. And I'm not talking about the capital of Virginia. I am, in fact, talking about Washington, D.C. So we got Tales of Washington, D.C. for you tonight. Now, before we dive in, there is one rule for tonight.
Usually we don't have them, but tonight we're going to.
Keep the partisan politics off to the side. We are not getting into that tonight, so please, please, please do not make us police the comments section of our chat here tonight. By its very nature, this chat will feature some names of numerous historical individuals who, may be more or less admirable than others. And no matter what your opinion is on their policies or their actions, please leave the partisanship at the door for this evening.
Yes.
Let us focus instead on some chilling tales of the paranormal for one more night.
Yes.
So, let's see.
So with that, as you can see, Yuna's being rather curious.
Oh, yeah, she is all
has
over the
gotten
place.
into quite the interesting phase, and she's trying to knock over the camera tonight. So
Yes.
I may have to do an extreme close-up every now and then. I apologize.
We already got... Oh, hi, Mom. Mom's watching.
Hey.
Hi, Mom.
Hi, Mom.
Oh,
Don't touch the screen.
long time no see. Yes, it has been 3 weeks. Gosh,
Yes.
October flew right by, for better for worse.
Yeah, I've actually been on straight for a week and a half with 1 day off, and that was Halloween.
Yeah,
That was my only day off in the past week and a half.
in the grand turn of irony, yes.
Yeah, I'm tired.
I think we all are.
Yeah,
but
and yes, we are going through Halloween withdrawal. We did already take down all of our outdoor decorations so we could clean up the yard before we start with the themed decorations for December. We're actually entering a decorating competition for our neighborhood association, and I have been starting my construction for that,
Yeah.
which will show off in another few weeks.
Yes. But in the meantime, let's see. We got Trina says hi. Glenn, hi. How's it going? Patrick.
Yep.
Tracy says hi to Yuna.
She's going over there exploring something new.
Yep. Oh, Allison. Hi, bosses. Hi,
Hey,
Allison.
girl. I hope you're getting rest too. I think Allison's the only one who's been busier than I have.
Where's Lulu? Lulu is somewhere minding her own business.
Yeah, she does not like the camera.
Yeah, she's not a huge fan of the camera, but she's around. Misty Pearl says hello, everybody. Hi.
Hey, Angel.
And Angel.
Yay,
Yes,
bestie
Angel.
friend.
Yes, one of our very good friends who lives up in Connecticut right now. So yay. Let's see. I think that covers everybody who's at least checked in and said hi.
Yes.
But yeah, so
Let's go ahead and get started.
Yeah, we got some stories to share with you tonight, and
I currently am starting because Yuna's on your lap.
Here you.
All right, so we're going to first talk about an old Native American... Hello. Hey, Lulu. Native American myth. This is known as the Curse of the Three Sisters. As you drive along the Washington Parkway and you cross over from the Virginia side of the Potomac River, you'll see three large granite rocks. And this is between Chain Bridge and Francis Scott Key Bridge. They are a focal point of this ancient Native American curse that no one will cross the river at this point. So scores of people have tried to cross the Potomac here, and many have actually died in their attempts. Even the Captain John Smith actually wrote about this curse and the three granite rocks in his diary. He referred to the sounds of sobbing and moaning coming from the vicinity of Three Sisters rocks. Some say that it's the curse of the Three Sisters that have thwarted the events of a bridge construction that was supposed to go high over the river with the three small rocks below. It was begun in the early 1970s, and steel pilings had appeared briefly on the D.C. shoreline. However, that actually never got built. I'll come back to that in a little while. To understand the curse, we got to go back to before the Europeans actually settled the land at Jamestown and in this area in 1607. There are many Native American enclaves and confederacies in the region, the west of the Chesapeake Bay area and on either side of the Potomac River. Tribal medicine men were important leaders, and they knew their powerful magic was received directly from the Great Spirit. They're over there.
Okay.
The story involves the three daughters of one of these medicine men. From the riverfront settlements, the Native Americans would launch their fishing and hunting trips. The area was rich in fish, game, and wild berries. They also had fertile soil in which they grew maize, beans, and squash. But there was animosity between the groups living on the Maryland side of the Potomac, and this was the Iroquois and the Susquehanna. Excuse me.
You okay?
Yeah, I just had a sneeze. Hey, Lulu. She's right down here. You can't see her quite yet. Anyway, so the Susquehanna lived on the Virginia side was the Powhatan Confederacy and the Algonquin. Warfare was frequent and ruthless between these groups. Captives were tortured, they were enslaved, and occasionally they were adopted into a new tribe. One day, after a pretty long and bad siege, the chief of the Algonquin village decided the situation finally stabilized just enough that he could actually send his men out in search of venison and other game as supplies were being depleted in the village. The warriors had fought for many days in a row to drive back the Susquehannock raiders across the river. They were hungry, they were weakened, and several actually had already died of starvation among the elderly in the village. So when the chief decided to go on this hunt, he didn't actually allow his three young sons to go with him. He thought they were not old enough to defend themselves if the enemy were to appear.
Slow it down just a little more projection.
Okay, sorry. So the sons were greatly disappointed in this. They were eager to prove their bravery, and they decided that they were going to go out on a fishing expedition. Hopefully this would provide enough fish for the village to sustain it until the men returned with their hunting catches. So they actually took the few remaining canoes that they had, and the following morning they went out onto the river to start their fishing expedition. Unbeknownst to them, the Susquehannock had left behind a scouting tribe, and they saw the three boys go out onto the river. They quickly went out and captured the boys, and in front of the entire village, they actually tortured and murdered the boys right on the river there. The people who witnessed this included the three daughters of the shaman, and they were in love with the three sons of the chief, and they were absolutely devastated. So what they decided to do is they were going to row across the river to the other tribe and demand of their chief the men who murdered their loves. They built a makeshift raft and they left without telling anybody what they were planning to do. They believed that they could get over there, succeed in this mission, bring those warriors back, and torture them using their dad's medicine magic. Unfortunately, when they set out, the current was so strong that they actually could not make it across the river, and they kept getting pushed out to sea. It was at this time that the skies started to darken, and the women called upon whatever magic that their father had taught them, and they pulled down a curse on this section of the river. And they basically said if they couldn't cross the river here, nobody could cross the river here. The next thing that people saw was that the river started turning in a huge wave turmoil. 3 bolts of lightning struck where the women were located, and when everything cleared, the girls were gone, and 3 rocks stood in the place that they were last seen. So this is how 3 sisters came to be. After that, the clouds rolled away, calm waters came in, and since then, everybody who's tried to even paddle out in a kayak or a canoe to these rocks, something terrible has happened to them. They have been overturned, they have died upon their attempt to get to these rocks. The Metropolitan Police actually have a list of names of victims that they have to add to on an all too regular basis, and this is including swimmers, fishermen, and as I said, canoeists who try to cross the river at this point. Old rivermen in this area say that there's a mournful cry heard drifting over the Potomac during a storm, which means there soon will be another drowning, so it's a warning as well that another drowning is about to occur. And as I said before, in 1972, bridge builders started to plan to build this bridge, and it came to a peak in 72 between the bridge builders and the environmentalists who were trying to protect Three Sisters Rock. A storm came up, and it was very similar to the one of the ancient tale that just turned the water completely choppy. It was very sudden, very quick. It flooded the river, and by the next morning, all of the framework that had been put on the DC side of the river had been swept downriver and was no longer seen. It was at that point in time they decided that the curse was real and they would not build a bridge there.
Wise decision, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah. So, any questions?
Nope, not about this one.
Not about this one? Okay, cool.
Yep, everybody's is chiming in saying they're happy we're back. We missed you guys too.
We did,
So,
but it was a very busy 3 weeks.
It has been a busy 3 weeks, and we are looking forward to talking to you this week, 2 weeks from now, and then the week after that.
Yeah.
So you guys 3 times this month.
Yep, and I've already got the next 2 scripts halfway done.
Yep, so we are looking forward to those as well. But getting ahead of ourselves, we still have a little bit to talk about here with Washington, D.C. So, the next tale is going to be in the Georgetown section of Washington, D.C., particularly over on 29th Street, where a house stands that was built in the year shortly after the American Revolution. Residents of the house would often report hearing swishing sounds going up the stairs, similar to the sound made by starched petticoats worn by women in the 1800s. Old newspaper accounts quote witnesses saying that just after hearing the swishing sound, they would catch a glimpse of a shadowy substance slipping into a room at the top of the stairs. No one ever reported the phenomenon going down the stairs. The ghost goes back to the time of an exclusive brothel that was rumored to have been in the house. The madam prided herself on maintaining a small but select women who were lovely to look at but also excellent conversationalists. The madam was originally from Atlanta, where she had lived on an old plantation. She was raised in wealth as a daughter of an oppressive southern planter. Her father had promised her to a local man whom she had no affection for. She had fallen for one of the field workers and was caught with him in the barn hayloft. Her father shot the field worker dead, then proceeded to beat his daughter before locking her in her room. She gathered a few items and slipped out of her window that night to escape her father and the life she had known. She was never seen again in the area. She did her best to hide her trail by traveling south to Macon, Georgia, before boarding a stagecoach northbound. It was on this stagecoach that she found a new friend, protector, and eventual love, a congressman from Georgia. She explained that she was running away from an abusive father and unwanted engagement. She conveniently left out the hayloft murder. The middle-aged congressman was more than sympathetic, and when they arrived in the nation's capital, he suggested a respectable ladies' boarding house and promised to call on her to help her obtain employment. Meanwhile, back in her home county, the story of her being caught in the hayloft spread quickly, and her fiancé felt he had been greatly dishonored by her actions. The man was ridiculed everywhere he went, even by his friends. Then, one morning, a hay bale was placed outside his door. The love for his fiancée turned to hate, and he blamed her for ruining his life. He swore revenge and began searching for her. The young woman had begun to plan for her future after the congressman spoke with her about his work, his colleagues, and Washington society. By this time, she had become the congressman's mistress and convinced him to purchase a large home in Georgetown for her. She kept her eyes and ears open as she was escorted to several societal functions by the congressman. Her great charm made her an instant success. One evening, after a satisfying dinner and carriage ride down by Rock Creek, she told her congressman of her plan. She would open a discreet brothel, employing only cultured women that would be capable of satisfying a man's mind as well as his body. She vowed that she would remain faithful to him. He was unconvinced at first, but she was able to bring him around. They spent several months organizing the business and let it quietly be known that a new and most unusual gentlemen's club was about to open. From the beginning, the lavishly decorated brothel was a success. Months passed, but the initial success did not fade. Perhaps this is due to the fact that neither the congressman nor his consort were greedy. They were content to keep their gentlemen's club small, employing only 4 girls and concentrating on quality, in companionship and clientele. Time passed quickly. Late one evening a few years later, a routine knock sounded on the door. The madame answered it, and she screamed. Standing on the doorstep, cursing and spitting, was the man she had been betrothed to. His face was weather-beaten and unshaved, his broad shoulders rounded from the hours he had spent in the saddle. He grabbed her wrist, and the hatred that he had suppressed through the years erupted with a slap across her face. The force of the slap broke his hold on her, and she spun loose and raced back into the house, him pursuing her. 2 employees and a man in the parlor witnessed the commotion and were startled by it. They stood speechless, watching as the crazed intruder chased the screaming woman upstairs, shouting profanities about her last days on her father's plantation. He cornered her in a room just off the top of the stairs. Another scream erupted, but died as if choked off. That's when the others were jarred into action and rushed up the stairs, but they were too late. Lying crumpled on the floor was the body of the young madam. Her throat still bore finger marks, and tears glistened on her cheeks. The window curtains fluttered on the far side of the room. No one else was there. The legend says that the murderer got away. The congressman moved behind the scenes to sell the house, hoping it would help him forget his lost love and what had happened to her there. Through the years, though, it seems that the ghost of the planter's daughter, who could not escape her past, also couldn't escape that last climb up the stairs. So again and again, she climbs them, disappearing into the room at the top, always hoping for a different outcome. The Evening Star published a story on August 13th, 1934, describing the ghost of a wispy young woman in blue crinoline who supposedly frequented the stairs and hallway of a home on 29th Street Northwest. The article's source was a woman who had recently moved into the house. The woman's description of the encounter made it seem possible that she had encountered the murdered madam. The woman's encounter with the tall, wispy white thing upset her so much that she stopped using the front stairs at night. Tragic tale.
Mm-hmm.
Poor young woman.
Yep.
But this seems to be one instance where the congressman at least tried to do well by her.
Yeah.
So maybe not all politicians are bad.
We said we were going to leave politics out of it.
I know. I'm not getting partisan. We'll leave it at that.
Yep. Zip.
My bad.
All right, so we're going to move over to Lafayette Square, which is one of the more famous squares in the center of D.C. In 1859, Washington's social foundations were rocked by a shocking scandal involving the flamboyant former Congressman Daniel Sickles and Philip Barton Key, the son of the composer Francis Scott Key. They had become two of Washington's most notable ghosts. Sickles was a good-looking former congressman from New York, and he had been married for a little over 5 years to a beautiful daughter of an Italian music teacher, Teresa Sickles. She was described as a pretty, girlish, attractive manner, well-educated, and charming in every way. Sickles went a few years without office before he gained a job with the Foreign Service, and he served in London with her. When the couple returned to Washington, Sickles channeled his energy into James Buchanan's bid for president and in the winning back of his seat in Congress. They moved into a home on Lafayette Square, which was the hub of the city's political and social circles. Teresa Sickles was an asset that Daniel needed in the social and political parties and dinners that they hosted. She was the soul and charm of the parties. However, after Sickles won back his seat, he stopped showcasing his lovely wife and spent more and more time away from her and their home. Daniel was spending time in New York with his constituents or in Washington parties among the belles of D.C., lobbyists, and fellow politicians. For a while, Teresa was content with her life at home. But then she started spending more time with widower Philip Barton Key, who was carrying on in his father's law practice. Before his marriage, he had been described as a renowned ladies' man, and the widower soon had that prestige returned to him. From their first meeting, the couple seemed inseparable. Whether Mrs. Sickles was attending balls, soirees, the theater, or walking in the streets, she was always accompanied by Philip Barton Key. Key added sparkle to Teresa's eye that had been missing for years. Key had an apartment on 15th Street Northwest, just a short distance away, and they had a handkerchief-waving signal that had not escaped the notice of the gossips. Someone slipped Daniel an anonymous note telling him about a guilty intrigue between his wife and Key, and it even named the rendezvous site. When Sickles confronted his wife with the charge of adultery, she was quoted as saying, "Oh, I see I am discovered." And she implored her husband to spare her. He did spare her, and he had her sign a confession and evidence for his plea later. By the following Sunday, Sickles was described as totally distraught, and he told one friend, "I am dishonored and a ruined man." When Key walked past the Sickles house that morning en route to the Washington Club, he signaled Teresa, and this was the final straw. "I have seen that scoundrel making his signal," Sickles said to his friend, and he shook his head and gasped, "By God, this is terrible." Later, when Sickles saw Key leave the club, he rushed out onto the square. Sickles headed off Key at 16th Street Northwest and called out, "Key, you scoundrel, you have dishonored my house. You must die." Witnesses saw Sickles fire a pistol. Key lunged and grabbed Sickles' vest to prevent him from reloading, but Sickles stepped back and produced a second pistol. Key saw this and started backing up towards the club. Sickles stalked him until he was about 10 feet away and fired. Key fell back, leaning against the tree, and begged for his life. Sickles fired one more shot.
He was carrying 3 guns, 3 loaded pistols.
He meant business.
He meant business.
Yeah.
You could say premeditated, but we'll get there.
Yeah. As Key fell the final time, his eyes moved towards the window he often watched from the club with opera glasses to see Teresa's signal. Within minutes, screams erupted from the Sickles house as Teresa learned of what had happened. Key's body was removed and buried with proper respect. However, the ghost of the debonair lawyer has never left Lafayette Square. Stories of encounters with Key have been handed down for over 100 years. Newspapers would print descriptions of a ghost reported by eyewitnesses. Some have seen it walking out of the old Washington Club, while others claim to have seen it on the sidewalk where he was slain. A shadowy silhouette is also seen to have ventured onto the square on occasion. Apparently, Key is intent on keeping his rendezvous with his mistress. Sickles still loved his 22-year-old wife and pitied her while he firmly insisted on a divorce. His trial was a spectacular one, and he had the best lawyers money could buy. He was acquitted on grounds of temporary aberration of the mind. This was the first time temporary insanity, as it is known today, was used in a legal case. Many believe Sickles' close friendship with President Buchanan also helped to sway or intimidate the jurors not to convict a man with such position and influence. Sickles and his wife separated within a few years, and Teresa died. But Sickles' career flourished. When the Civil War erupted, he raised his own contingent of men from New York and rode into battle. His patriotism endeared him to the President and Mrs. Lincoln, and he was assured of a position post-war. He often dined with them at the White House. General Sickles lost his leg at Gettysburg, and he personally bequeathed it to the Army's National Medical Museum.
Yes.
That's weird.
It is a bit weird.
After the war, he was named Minister to Spain by President Grant, and by this time, Sickles' ego knew no bounds. The man,
Egomaniac.
Yeah.
Textbook definition.
When you donate your own leg to a museum.
Oh, and it gets better.
Oh, yeah. When Sickles returned to Washington, he would often drop by the medical museum where his leg was enshrined.
Howdy leg. Hi leg.
Bringing friends with him, he loved pointing it out and recanting the story of it being cut from underneath him. No.
Smidge weird.
After his death, Sickles' ghost was reported to continue to visit the museum and his leg. A custodian at the Medical Museum of the Armed Forces Institute of Pathology would often speak of Sickles' visitations. He claimed his father had served with Sickles in the war, and he took pride in working around the leg, even though he was an old man bent with age. The custodian admitted he had never seen the general himself, but one of his co-workers had. He pointed to the glass and said that held the leg, and stated his co-worker encountered a fat shadow with one leg that seems to float through the hallway to the case one night. The co-worker threatened to quit if he wasn't switched to the day shift. Others who have seen the general always describe him as fat, round, or obese, which fits Sickles' elderly shape. The custodian did wonder if the stories would stop and die once the museum was moved. The old brick building that once housed the museum was torn down to make room for the Hirshhorn Museum, and the Armed Forces Museum was moved to the grounds of Walter Reed Medical Center. Since Hirshhorn opened, there have been no reports of the general in the museum. He has not been seen at Walter Reed either. Maybe he has returned to Gettysburg, to where he lost the leg to begin with, and we all know Gettysburg is haunted as ever.
Haunted is all get out.
Yep. One final story about Burton Key. As mentioned before, he was killed outside the Washington Club and is seen coming out of that building. During the Lincoln administration, Secretary of State William Seward lived in that building, and the club was long gone by then. It has also been the home of Secretary of State Henry Clay and Vice President John Calhoun. The stories of the ghost didn't trouble the Stewart family so they quickly settled in. However, their life in this home was soon to be shattered. The group of dissidents led by John Wilkes Booth planned to assassinate President Lincoln, Vice President Andrew Johnson, and key members of the Lincoln administration, including William Seward. Lewis Powell was assigned to Seward, and he broke into the house on that night. Seward's son Frederick and the servant were alerted by strange noises unlike anything they had ever heard. They rushed to the secretary's bedroom and surprised Powell before he could complete his mission. If they had not been summoned to the bedroom by the strange noises, Seward would have been killed, as he was confined to his bed with injuries from a carriage accident. Many say that Philip Key's ghost saw another tragedy unfolding and created a ruckus to alert people to the intruder. The loud interior noises continued after the Sewards moved out. Several owners tried outlasting the activity, but none could. Not even the YMCA. It took over the building in the 1880s, and it was not immune to the haunting. Many believe that Seward's ghost joined Key's after his death in 1872. Several mediums have claimed that Seward returned to the site, that he had so dramatically affected his life, and he makes the lives of the other occupants miserable. Because no one wanted to put up with the ghost, the old club was eventually torn down in 1895, and since then the ghosts have been dormant on that property. Neighbor Seward is finally at peace, but Key is still seen out on the square. So 3 hauntings, 1 story.
Yep. Now, real quick, for anybody that's watching us on Facebook, if I can ask a quick favor. Now, Facebook is doing something a little weird. If you, on your screen somewhere, see a bell, if you can click on that bell, that helps us with our visibility when we do these live streams.
Yep.
It gets people to kind of, help with the notifications and that. So if you can, if you see a bell somewhere on your screen, if you can click it, we greatly appreciate it, because that'll help us not just tonight, but moving forward as we continue to do these live streams in the future.
Sure.
So, yeah. And
Ring the bell.
Ring the bell. Ring the bell. So, thank you for that. Now, with that, we're going to move to a location that everybody knows.
Yep.
Of course, you can't.
It was on our picture for this event.
Yeah, you can't go to Washington, D.C. and not talk about the Capitol building itself. So,
a couple of stories from the Capitol building.
oh wait, I'm getting ahead of myself. No, sorry, fooled you. We're on Capitol Hill.
Not the Capitol building. We will be in the Capitol building.
We will get to the Capitol building, yes. The Madeira is doing its job. Anyways.
You had a 1 full glass before this one.
So I did.
I'm catching up.
Cheers. Cheers, everybody. So, we are on Capitol Hill, but we are on G Street. And there is a house on G Street that tells a tale of an eternal love, anger, and horror. The story was first published in the Evening Star in the spring of 1891. A young woman whose family had just moved out of the house on G Street, claiming they couldn't handle the occurrences anymore, told the story to a gentleman acquaintance who wrote for the Star. Her family had rented the G Street house upon their arrival in Washington, D.C. the previous December. The real estate agent had said nothing about it being haunted, so nothing had prepared them for what was to come. The family had only lived in the house for a week when the first experience occurred. The young woman was going upstairs after dinner to dress for the theater when she stumbled over something about midway up the first flight. She twisted her ankle and cried out as she fell to one knee. At the same time, she heard a faint meow, leading her to believe that she had just stepped on a cat, though there was no cat to be found. However, the family's dislike for cats was so great that no cat was ever permitted in the house. Can't say I'm too much of a fan of this family right now, but
Well, we love our kitties.
we love our kitties. Now, the sprained ankle pained her so much that she canceled her theater date for that night. Her parents immediately began inquiries of her brother and servants as to how a cat came to be in the house. No one knew, and even though the event was strange, it was forgotten in a few days. That is until a similar incident about a month later. The young lady's father was coming down the stairs from his study at 10:30 in the evening for the purpose of locking up for the night. When he was a few steps below the first landing, he heard behind him a distinct whisper, a whisper of an angry man. The father turned, startled, and in turning put his foot upon something soft and yielding. He did not have a chance to see it, but he did hear a meow while he was tripped up by whatever it was. He narrowly escaped a serious fall by grabbing the stair rail. He erupted in anger, swearing dreadfully, demanding to know how it was that a cat had for a second time been allowed to get into the house against his orders. He was convinced that he had heard a man's whisper on the stairs. They searched the house, attic to cellar, and revealed nothing, no cat or man. He rationalized away the whisper event as an illusion, but berated the staff for the cat's presence. He vowed to fire the entire staff if he ever saw a cat within the house. The phantom cat became a household joke, until the upstairs maid had another encounter at 10 a.m. There was plenty of daylight when the maid rushed to the lady of the house in hysterics, clutching her dustpan and broom. Calming the maid, the lady learned through a disjointed story that the maid encountered the invisible cat. She was sweeping down the stairs when something she did not see got in the way of her broom. She looked to find out what it was, but seeing nothing gave another stronger sweep of the broom. Her broom was again stopped, but this time with a very audible hiss and meow. The family was not superstitious, nor did they believe in ghosts, especially ghost cats. They tried to convince themselves and the servants that there were natural explanations for the incidents if they just had a little more information. For the next 36 hours, the family mused over logical explanations. Then the event took place that brought the matter to crisis. It was a Thursday evening, and the family was in the front drawing room. The lady of the house was knitting, while the father, brother, and young woman were reading. It was about 11:15 p.m., later than they would normally have been up, when the young woman looked up at her father about to comment on the time. Her father placed a finger on his lips, silencing them all. Each one strained to hear what had caught his attention. Then each of them heard the faint whispering coming from the hallway or the stairs. As they all listened, the whispering grew louder. The father moved to the entry silently, stood on the threshold for a moment before stepping to the foot of the stairs. He turned and beckoned them to join him. They quickly moved to the stairs, listening and looking intently. The whispering was coming from up the stairs and sounded quite distant at this point. The gaslight happened to shed light on the stairs, and no one was visible. Her father climbed the stairs, pausing to listen until he got to the top and descended again. He claimed he passed by the whispers on the stairs. They continued to listen and heard two distinct voices, a man's angry words and that of a pleading woman. The fact that they could hear but not see frightened them to the core. Then they heard an audible exclamation, followed immediately by a hiss and meow of a cat, and then what sounded like the fall of something heavy on the stairs themselves. The family looked at one another in complete astonishment. The lady of the house almost fainted and was carried to the drawing room by the brother. The young woman also felt faint and went with her mother to spend the night at a neighbor's residence. Father and son remained in the house, not wanting to give in to their fears of the supernatural, and they performed a thorough search of the house. The next day, the father rented a house on New Hampshire Avenue Northwest. The family was moved out by sunset. He called on the real estate agent to turn in the keys, and the agent waived the customary month's notice because of the circumstances. The agent admitted that several other tenants had claimed that the house was haunted, but had not bothered to mention anything because the tales were not definitive. He thought it was all a bunch of nonsense. As they continued to talk, the realtor asked what the family had experienced. As the father told the realtor what had happened, the realtor got up and started to pace about the room. At the conclusion of the father's story, the realtor sat down and explained his agitation. The realtor said that a beautiful young girl had lived in the house and was in love with a handsome young attorney of moderate means. However, the girl's father had chosen a wealthy older widower for his daughter to marry. The father was temperamental and determined and brought his daughter and the widower together as often as possible. The father would force his daughter to marry the man of his choosing. One evening, the father invited the widower over for dinner. It was not unusual for a dinner guest to stay the night, and the daughter was furious with this arrangement. She was polite to her father's guest and sat through the delicious dinner, perhaps having a little too much wine with the meal. Cheers. Being an older gentleman, the guest retired early, and the daughter could not be polite any longer. She denounced the suitor that her father had chosen and stated that she would never marry him. The young woman then proceeded upstairs. Her exasperated father followed, spewing violent language and threats. He wanted to have the last word. She paused on the landing, and he remembered his friend and lowered his voice to a whisper. They continued to argue until he struck her or pushed her. She stepped backwards to regain her balance, but her foot landed on her faithful cat, who had followed her up the stairs. The animal squealed. The woman screamed as she tumbled down the stairs. The fall broke her neck, and her pet lay dead of a broken spine on the landing.
Poor kitty.
Poor kitty. The cook witnessed the event. as she was trying to sneak back upstairs after entertaining friends against the master's wishes. She told authorities, but the man escaped trial by painting the cook as a thief and a liar. Instead, the cat was blamed for tripping the girl on the stairs. The real estate agent said he had always believed the cook's story, especially now. He also mentioned his interest in the case stemmed from the fact that the young lawyer who had loved the murdered girl was his own father. Another tragic tale.
And kittens where they're not supposed to be.
Yes, kittens everywhere, because kittens.
Yeah, one is settling down. Lulu, who I did show off a minute ago, has decided to climb behind the TV.
Is that where she is?
Yep.
Oh, I see her. She's coming out.
Okay, good.
Good. Now we got the Capitol building.
Okay.
And Beth gets to kick this off.
I get to kick this off.
You get to kick this off. Got a couple tales of the Capitol
I
building.
had way too much fun with this research. All right, so, you would like the wine?
Yeah.
I'm hiding it.
Unless you want me to drink from the bottle.
No.
Thought so.
We're a little more civilized. All right, a little more. We're getting back to normal. All right, so we're going to go ahead and jump into the Capitol, and were some very interesting stories that I found that are not necessarily the more commonly known ones. So the cornerstone of the Capitol was laid in 1793 by, of course, George Washington, with full Masonic ceremonies in the southeast corner of the north section of the building. Of course, they've done a very famous painting of him doing this. The building had been designed by Dr. William Thornton, a versatile physician from the Tortilla in the West Indies. 7 years later, the first section of the Capitol was complete and Congress moved in. Since this, it has since gone through several expansions, giving the current complex the winding, narrow marble halls and passageways, the dank, dark basements, and dimly lit corridors, and its seemingly infinite rooms and sub-basements. It contains 16.5 acres of floor space and 540 rooms, and almost from the beginning there were stories, not all of them political in nature. One of the earliest ghosts reported to roam the Capitol corridors belonged to a stonemason who had become sealed into one of the walls while the building was under construction. He is seen, trowel in hand, passing through a wall in the basement on the Senate side of the building. The tale goes that the mason argued with a carpenter who lost his temper and smashed the mason's head in with a brick. The carpenter then used the mason's own trowel to seal the mason into a makeshift tomb in the walls of the Capitol building. When the next major expansion of the Capitol was made necessary, President Fillmore laid a new cornerstone for the House and the Senate wings on July 4th of 1851. These wings would be of marble, not the sandstone like the original building. They would also add a new larger dome to replace the smaller copper one that was a wooden dome covered in copper. A worker during the construction of the dome was said to have fallen during the construction onto the marble floor of the rotunda. His specter is seen dressed in his faded overalls and carrying his old wooden toolkit, retracing the final journey that he had en route to the rotunda where he made his final climb. So those are the two earliest ghost stories that I was able to find. Do you have a question?
No. Is it my turn?
Yes, it is.
Ah.
You get to talk about dear old Quincy.
So, yes, we do have... Actually, we really don't have too many famous names that everybody's going to know tonight, but except for this one.
Except for this one. And I specifically did that.
Yeah. So, this one, everybody's going to know who this is. Well,
I hope you remember your early presidents.
Yes. So, Mr. John Quincy Adams. He was the 6th president of the United States between 1825 and 1829. He just served a single term. But after he finished his term, he was not satisfied. He did not think that his work was done, and he ran for Congress because he thought he still had much to contribute to the relatively new country.
So not something that commonly happens anymore.
No.
It's been a long time.
Who was left? Taft? Did he go to the Supreme Court after being president?
I'd have to look.
I think so. But
Sounds right, but I'd have to look to confirm.
I'm pretty sure Taft went to the Supreme Court after being president. But that might be the last time that one of the
President
presidents
served something else afterward.
went to another branch of government after being president.
Yeah.
Anyways, so Adams was elected to Congress from 1831 and served all the way till 1848. Among his colleagues in the House, Adams became known as the Old Man Eloquent. He frequently raised his voice in defense of free speech and in opposition to slavery. When a congressional majority created a gag rule that ordered the tabling of all resolutions regarding slavery, it outraged Adams. Every year from 1836 to 1844, Adams rose to lead the fight against the order until it was finally rescinded in 1844. Adams also did not favor President Polk's war with Mexico. On February 21st, 1848, at 81 years old, Adams stood in Statuary Hall in the House wing and let it be known that he would not support the congressional plan to bestow special honors on the generals who had won the war with Mexico. Adams never finished his speech about the most unrighteous war, as he called it, as he suffered a cerebral stroke and fell unconscious to the floor. He was carried into the Speaker's office and died there 2 days later. A short time after his death, Capitol workers began telling colleagues that Adams's ghost was visiting the House chamber. Eyewitness accounts in several newspapers chronicled the occurrences for over a century. They report a figure that appears to be delivering a speech, and it always occurs where Adams was fatally stricken. This spot has become known as the whisper spot. If one speaks in a whisper here, they can be heard clear across the room, but those close by cannot hear it. Many believe it is caused by Adams, who just wants to make sure that his speech was heard on the other side of the room.
I love those whisper spots.
Yes.
They're always fun.
Yep. And Adams is still taking advantage of it.
Yes.
Am I continuing with Statuary Hall?
Yes, you are.
Oh, okay, cool.
Because it's the same location.
It is. Different story, though. So, anyways, Statuary Hall was the location of the original House of Representatives, where John Quincy Adams is still seen making that aforementioned speech. In 1857, the new House wing was completed and the representatives moved in. The hall was then set aside as a display space for life-size statues of state heroes. In 1890, an old Capitol guard swore he stumbled into Statuary Hall late one night only to discover that he had in fact walked into the old House chambers and the entire ghostly membership was in assembly. Now, it must be reported that the guard did have a pint bottle of liquor in his pocket at the time. Cheers. But he continued to stick to his story even though he was thoroughly ridiculed. Another crusty guard, whose name has been lost to time, is remembered for what he saw in Statuary Hall one night. The story dates to just after the conversion of the chambers to Statuary Hall. The old guard developed a great apprehension as the various statues were added to the hall. Many others around the Capitol were worried that the added weight of the statues would cause the floor to give way, but the old guard was concerned with the statues themselves. The lifelike figure seemed a little too lifelike. He confided to his colleagues that he was uncomfortable and uneasy around them. He didn't like working nights, too many statues, too many shadows. A few years later, he was scheduled to work a night shift on New Year's Eve. As he approached the hall, he was stopped dead in his tracks. In the distance, a clock was striking 12. And he saw down the corridor the room awash with a soft, flickering light. He clearly saw silhouettes float down off of their pedestals. He clearly remembers seeing Grant shake hands with Lee. The guard opened his mouth to scream, but he could not. He was petrified with fear. As the last clock strike reverberated and died away, he rubbed his eyes, but the ghostly figures were still there. Then they began to dance. In the stillness of the hall, the guard looked upon a scene like none he had ever witnessed before or since. Quivering with fear, he fled the Capitol. He couldn't keep quiet about what he had seen. Blanched and trembling, he told his story the next day. This was too much for the head of the Capitol Police, who prescribed an extended rest for the guard. Despite the ridicule and the incredulity, I guess that's a word, of his colleagues, even today, others inside the Capitol have reported similar experiences. The guards on their rounds on New Year's Eve avoid Statuary Hall around midnight. They claim that it is a tribute to their ancient colleague, but the truth is that a tribute sounds better than finding out if the old man was right, after all.
I still want to go visit the inside of the Capitol.
Yeah, we actually haven't.
We haven't.
I haven't been in there since my 8th grade field trip to Washington, D.C.
You've been in there more than I have.
Oh.
I've never been inside the Capitol. I've been
Yes,
outside of it.
Yes, you have. We went to that party.
Yeah, but that not like in where you can actually see the main tour.
We got invited to a private party at the Capitol. There was 100 people there.
Yeah.
It's been a while.
Event.
It's been a while. At least 10 years now.
Yeah.
It was cool.
I took the day off from work.
As did I.
It was fun. We
Yep.
toured the DC area and then we went to the party.
Yep.
And then we came home.
Yep. But yeah, we didn't really get to see the sights.
I want to do the official tour
Fair enough.
at some point.
We'll get there.
And I do want to do the White House at some point.
Of course.
Because it's the White House.
And real quick, we are not getting to the White House tonight because...
Yeah, because I researched too much.
We had more than enough material, so we would be here half the night if we tried to throw in the White House stuff that we wanted to talk about.
So we'll do a part 2 later.
There will be a part 2 of Washington, D.C. At some point. We'll get there. Who knows, maybe before the next election or something. I don't know.
Or maybe before January.
Whatever.
Yeah.
We got stuff to talk about.
We do.
And we will get to the White House one day. But in the meantime, we do have one more tale for you this evening. And do you want to talk about this one?
No, you want to do this one. I know you do.
You can talk about it. I talked about the last kitty.
Okay. Okay, so Demon Cat.
Demon Cat.
Demon Cat time, because this one is just way too much fun. And since we're right after Halloween, it was perfect. Alright, so the most famous apparition in the Capitol isn't a person, it is that of the dreaded Demon Cat, flippantly referred to as DC. And this is, of course, by those who haven't learned that you don't mock DC at all. The cat is said to make its home in the structure's storage area. During the early days of the Capitol, the lawmakers, their staff, and the workmen would bring their food into the building with them. One could find anything from live chickens to old ham hocks in an office. Bread crust, apple cores, and other residue wasn't always cleared up quickly, and this caused a general lack of cleanliness, which led to a rather large rat problem. So they brought in cats, mousers, to actually take care of the rat problem. Well, as they got the problem under control, the need for the cats abated, and some were taken home by the members of Congress as pets. Others simply wandered off into the surrounding neighborhoods, but one cat has been left in a building, and he is no ordinary cat. For well over 100 years, the phantom feline has roamed the darkened corridors of the Capitol, carefully choosing just when to appear and whom to harass. Demon Cat waits until the victim is alone and the hour is late. Some members of the Night Guard service shudder at the thought of encountering DC, as they have heard the tales from their colleagues. Seeing the black cat walk towards them is enough to startle anyone, but an encounter with the demon cat can truly traumatize you. On a January night, one victim described his walk down a chilly, darkened hallway. He saw a shadowy cat walking silently towards him. As it got closer, it started to swell in size. The guard rubbed his eyes, and he looked again to see the cat only continuing to grow larger. He felt paralyzed, and he stared into its glowing, piercing eyes, and finally it grew to the size of a tiger. The purring of the cat changed to a ferocious snarl. Then it was a deafening roar as the monstrous animal lunged, claws extended towards the guard. He tried to leap away, but he could not move. It was as if his feet were nailed to the floor. He screamed, covered his face with his arms as the animal were mere inches away. Then nothing. the demon cat had vanished into the air as the man screamed. The guard stood alone, trembling in the corridor. Only the sounds of his heavy breathing broke the silence. He was covered in a cold, clammy sweat and felt absolutely drained. The narrow marble corridor now made him think of a tomb. He pulled himself together and with a shudder returned to his desk. He never did finish his rounds that night. Through the years, there have been various reactions from those who have encountered the demon cat. Some have fainted, others have run screaming from the building, and others, like the guard, have been paralyzed with fear. The demon cat may even have been responsible for the death of one elderly guard who suffered a fatal heart attack. Demon cat isn't one of the capital's most frequent spectral visitors, but when he does appear, you need to pay attention. This most famous of all the legendary apparitions always appears just before a national tragedy or on the eve of the changing of an administration. So we might be seeing him in January. We will see. The senators, representatives, staff workers, maintenance personnel, and protection staff all walk the Capitol halls in fear of encountering the dreaded demon cat, for they are all convinced that such a meeting is a warning of an unpleasant thing to come. I wonder if it showed up right before 9/11.
Good question.
Or before COVID. Guys, I call this a national tragedy.
Yeah, definitely not the... it was the best of times. No, it was the worst of times.
Yeah.
It was the worst of times.
Yep.
But anyways.
So that's our last story tonight. I definitely will be very curious to see if something happens in January, but we'll wait a while to find out. And with that, we're going to talk about vampires next time.
Yes, we're finally going to get to them.
And that does include a DC vampire, by the way.
Of course it does.
Because it's DC.
Well, it's I mean, that's kind of just what you were...
That's what I was just working on tonight.
Well, yeah, well, not just that, but when you were doing the research for this show, you kept coming DC Vampire, the Washington Vampire, etc.
I did.
Et cetera.
I kept coming over it, and I kept coming over other things, and I belong to a lot of historical podcasts and news outlets. And
vampires
also
everywhere.
2 weeks of vampire news in my feed. So,
It was a sign. It was
vampires
a sign.
it is. So yeah, we're going to talk about vampires in 2 weeks.
Yes. And thank you all so much for the DC stories tonight. It was awesome. Oh,
Yay. Thank you, Patrick.
Yeah, thank you. I feel like DC has a couple of them that may be... DC has a couple of vampires, but it may be New York. I'm sure that there's vampires. Yeah. There's vampires.
We are going to include a few in Virginia. Not the Richmond vampire, because we talked about that on our tours. But we'll talk about some of the other vampires that have appeared. Also,
vampires.
Yep. Now, as for other things that Chris and I are doing coming up this coming Saturday, we're going to be at Hanover Tavern doing the dinner and investigation with Transcend.
Which, if I understand, I think that one is sold out.
Double check, but yeah.
Yeah.
And then the following weekend, Chris and I are actually going to be on a Haunted Nights event, investigating the U.S. Wisconsin down in Norfolk.
Yep, we're going to be there as
guests this time.
As actual guests. So
we don't get to lead, we get to be guests this time.
Yes. So we're going to be there, and also a couple of our guides actually are going to be down in Norfolk that night as well, investigating the Masonic Lodge with Daryl Marson and basically our friends, the folks over at RTL Paranormal are organizing that. So a couple of investigations on November 14th. And
yes, Allison, woohoo Masonic team.
yes, yeah, Allison.
Or right Wisconsin there. Team, she's Masonic team. It's kind of a fun night.
Werewolf stories sometimes, yeah. And we will have to get to werewolf stories at some point. So.
Werewolves and other monsters. I have a lores list started.
Yeah, I don't know if y'all can see right there. Right there is our plan for tomorrow night. We are going to, instead of...
Classic monster movie horror night. Yes.
We are pointedly not going to be watching the news. We are going to be watching classic horror movies.
Because we didn't get to watch any movies in Halloween.
No, we didn't. We
were too busy.
People watched
I was jealous.
People watch scary movies all October long, except for us because we're usually out giving tours at night.
So we're catching up in November.
Yes, we're going to be watching some scary stories, and we're starting with the classic ones. So,
Yeah.
yes, the Wolfman and Frankenstein,
Bride
Dracula.
of Frankenstein.
Yeah, so
I
all
think
kinds of good stuff.
The Thing is up there.
Yeah.
Anyway, but we're gonna watch 6 classic horror movies. We'll see how far we get.
I don't think we're going to watch all 6 of them tomorrow, but we'll watch a couple.
I don't have to work Wednesday, so it's okay if I stay up late.
Yes, but we're going to be doing that. We'll be getting everything in place for our chat in 2 weeks, and then remember, we're actually, because we
skipped a week.
We are going to be going 2 Mondays in a row again. We got vampires in 2 weeks and pop culture, right?
Yep.
Yes, we are going to be doing pop culture haunts. Basically, we're going to be talking about ghost stories that relate to pop culture type things.
So videos, books, video games,
comic
movies,
books, stuff like that.
books.
So we'll have a few real life ghost stories that have been in one way or another interpreted into pop culture.
Yeah.
So that's going to be 3 weeks from now.
Yes.
2 weeks from now, vampires. 3 weeks from now, pop culture, and then we'll see where we go from there. Oh.
After that, we're going to do Key West.
Yes, 2 weeks after that, we're doing Key West.
Yep.
So we actually
the
got
first one in December is Key West.
Yep. The second Monday in
I
December.
actually am planned out for a distance right now.
Yes, we're getting a little ahead of the curve, so we got some stuff. We got some stuff going on. So let's make sure no final questions. Rachel, yes, DCA does have a vampire vibe to it, so yes, I totally get that.
More energy vampires these days.
And Glenn says thank you, and we say thank you again for
Yes.
watching. We appreciate it. And Allison says, yes, the other vampires need love as well. So, yes, we will be doing those. Trina, thank you very much. You said great stories tonight. Yay. This is why we do this. We love you guys. You guys are great.
And I've actually had a lot of fun doing these researches. Even though I've been exhausted, it's been fun doing them.
Oh, and when we do get to vampires, Patrick says vampires are his absolute favorite. So, maybe we'll get to that in January?
Or you mean werewolves?
Werewolves, yes.
Yeah, we can see about January. We can see about doing lore in January.
Yeah, we'll definitely get to werewolves. I like werewolves.
Yeah, because December's already planned out.
Yep.
Because we will do a traditional Christmas ghost stories as well. So Key West and that will take up our December shows.
Yep.
So January I'll look at doing lore.
Yep.
Wow, I have 3 months planned now.
It's amazing what happens when the tours end and we actually have time to think.
Yeah. It's like, wow, I actually get proactive.
So, anyways.
The tours are still going on.
Oh,
so,
yeah. Sorry. Yeah, no, not to misunderstand.
Yeah.
We're just done with October.
Yeah.
So
we're still going most Fridays and Saturdays this month. We'll slip into our true low season schedule in December, where we will be going just once a week on the weekends, except for maybe holidays. We'll be going more than once. We'll see.
Yeah, we'll play it by ear, but we're getting into that low season where we can actually take a step back, catch our breath, think a little bit, and we'll go from there.
Yep.
One thing at a time.
Yep. So let's go 1 month at a time right now.
one week at a time, basically. Whatever.
I'm
Cheers,
kind of
everybody.
hoping for snow.
Snow
I
is something
really
that would
want
be
snow
lovely.
right now. I'm jealous of all my friends up in New York and Vermont that have snow.
Ooh, Glenn says his birthday is January 19th.
Ooh, what day
So,
of the week is that?
I'm not sure,
I
but
don't know.
either way. Glenn, tell you what, you have been one of our most loyal followers. So if you have an idea for one for us to do close to your birthday, let us know. Because we haven't planned January yet.
Yep.
Aside from now, we basically kind of promised Patrick that we will do werewolves at least one of the Mondays in January. But if you have an idea for the other Monday, a theme for us to research and do for the other Monday in January, drop us a note and let us know.
Yep.
So, awesome.
All right. So cheers, y'all. We will catch you in 2 weeks.
Cheers.
And have a fun, safe next 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm. Happy November.
Yes.
I
Happy
guess.
Turkey Month.
Turkey Month. Yes.
Thanksgiving month.
I like that. Yes. Cheers to that. So, all right, everybody. Y'all have a good night. Thank you so much again for tuning in, and we will see you again soon.
Yep.
Drop us a line anytime.
Cheers.
Glen wants Point Lookout.
I have to see if I can find some more.
I think we can do something about that. All right. Good night, everybody.